The tale unfolds with a girl diligently tending to her duties at the zoo, beaming as she cleans the animal enclosures. Entrusted with overseeing the predators in her colleague's absence, she eagerly embraces the responsibility. Her admiration for these creatures, captivated by their allure and strength, adds to her joy of working at the zoo, even in a cleaning capacity. Amid her contentment, a sudden encounter with a prowling panther startles her. Before she can process what's happening, she awakens in a forest, bewildered by the sudden shift from her zoo duties to this unfamiliar setting. Despite assuming she might have been relocated to a safari zone, the environment doesn't match any known zoo landscape. Strangely, she realizes she's transformed into a crow, a development that shocks her given the usual beliefs about reincarnation. Frustrated by this transformation into a common bird, she grapples with the cruel twist of fate and the challenges of a crow's diet. Unable to consume insects and decaying matter, she opts to search for fruits and berries. Taking flight, the exhilaration of soaring through the skies provides a sense of liberty. During her flight, she overhears a conversation below, assuming it's people, which sparks an idea. Why struggle for survival when she could become someone's pet? Descending to investigate, she discovers not humans but formidable green orcs, realizing she's landed in a fantasy world, far from her previous reality. Disappointed by the turn of events, as she'd hoped to encounter a handsome man rather than a monstrous species, she grapples with the uncertainty of the world she's landed in. On a positive note, she comprehends the local language. Eavesdropping on the orcs discussing their quest to seek and slay a human who had killed one of their kind, she is thrilled at the prospect of finding this human first to warn him and possibly find refuge as his pet. Spotting a blonde-haired man by a tree, injured and believing his time is near, he regrets lacking his family's predatory abilities, which might have given him a fighting chance. Spotting the crow, the man feels a strange familiarity but misinterprets its presence, assuming it's an omen of death, unable to shoo it away for fear of alerting the approaching orcs. The orcs, following the crow's call, move closer, causing the man to scare the bird off to avoid being found. Understanding the orcs' pursuit, the crow cleverly leads them away from the man, ultimately misleading them to a cliff, where they realize their futile chase. Relieved at her successful diversion, the girl flies away from the orcs, pleased with outsmarting the monsters. In her determination, she resolves to locate the young man once more. Though she struggles to recall where she might have seen him, perhaps in a book or a game, she's certain of one thing: his survival is crucial. He holds the key to understanding this unfamiliar world, and with his help, she might discern her location. Returning to the place where she last spotted him, the crow finds only traces, notably a trail of blood, indicating he had moved on. Realizing he's lost a significant amount of blood, she feels a pressing need to aid him. In her limited knowledge, she decides to gather herbs, although she's uncertain about their efficacy for a human. Trusting her instincts, honed by her avian nature, she distinguishes between dangerous and edible plants. However, apprehensive about inadvertently harming the man, she resolves to gather the herbs first and deliberate on their usage later. Meanwhile, the young man tends to his wound near a river, grateful for the nearby water body to cleanse the blood scent, making it harder for the orcs to track him. Pondering the oddity of hoping the bird might lead his pursuers away from him despite his injuries, he acknowledges the irony that the bird, often linked with death, has paradoxically preserved his life. Yet, he realizes the folly of relying solely on chance and determines to find his own means of survival. Just as these thoughts occupy his mind, a bundle of herbs unexpectedly cascades onto his head. Perplexed by their sudden appearance, he recognizes their potential. They are herbs known for their clotting properties, crucial for stemming bleeding. Glancing upward, he spots the familiar crow perched on a branch, struck by the bird's unexpected intelligence. He entertains wild thoughts. Could it be a shape-shifting harpy or a dragon in disguise? Yet, rationality prevails. Dismissing these notions, his acquaintances lack familiars, and harpies and dragons harbor no affinity for humans. Such mythical beings are scarce. As he busies himself with bandaging his wound and donning his jacket, a shower of berries descends before the crow lands on the ground, calling out loudly. Interpreting the bird's actions as an offering, he tentatively tries a berry, surprised by its sweetness, a fleeting reprieve from his troubles. Thus commenced the peculiar shared life in the forest between a young man named Kamet and the main heroine, inhabiting the body of a crow. The bird proved invaluable, bringing medicinal herbs and forewarning danger, while the man provided sustenance by catching and cooking fish and rabbits over a fire, nourishing the crow. The girl found solace in not having to subsist on insects and decay for some time. Before long, the young man bestowed a name upon the crow, Ryan, an act that filled the girl with a profound sense of tranquility, akin to being called upon by the most renowned singer on stage. She couldn't help but feel bashful when the young man cast a smile her way. His tender gesture of stroking her head left her nearly melting, developing an attachment that mirrored his own. Previously encircled by false friends ready to betray him at any turn, the young man never fathomed encountering a creature so genuinely and selflessly supportive. He longed to abandon the life at the castle and remain with Ryan indefinitely. Regrettably, duty bound him to return to the palace. His absence would see his cruel brother, Revelan, ascend the throne, plunging the people into further bloodshed. Aware that his brother likely deemed him dead or missing, he comprehended the necessity of reclaiming his family's power, transforming into a wolf to assert his worthiness as the heir to both family and throne, regardless of the challenges ahead. Rionel soared through the sky, contemplating the urgency of gathering medicinal herbs before nightfall. Yet, a glint below caught her attention, a shiny object resembling a precious stone. Initially hesitant, her crow instincts nudged her to investigate. She couldn't resist the desire to inspect it, despite her human reservations. Descending, only to realize it wasn't a gem but a legendary stone, she remembered its name, the Croban Rock from a game she once played. This legendary stone held the power to bestow unique character abilities, a pivotal decision in the game's plot, a memory from her past experiences in a game she couldn't quite recall. 3 years ago, a deity played a cruel trick, sending her into a game's narrative. Now, recognizing Kamet as one of the available game characters, the heir to the Empire, currently navigating a tumultuous journey, she grasped her role in aiding his awakening. Delivering the Croban Rock to him might secure enough influence for Kamet to help her return to her world. Kamet, taken aback by Rionel's revelation, comprehended the significance of this rare stone. Its impact could either transform his life or lead to his demise. He urged Rionel to live freely should he consume the fruit. As he ingested the fruit, a transformative energy emanated from him, an awe-inspiring sight that attracted the attention of nearby werewolves. Although initially contemplating waiting it out in safety, Rionel, remembering Kamet's words, refused to abandon him, vowing to distract the werewolves and shield him. Kamet endured the agonies of rebirth, motivated by the sacrifices made for his survival. The divine animal's legacy, passing their power to those created in the image of God, unfolded as Kamet transformed into a majestic wolf, overpowering the attacking werewolves. Blooded but determined, Rionel held her ground, her resolve unwavering. In the aftermath, Kamet, now human again, caught Rionel as she faltered, questioning her self-sacrifice. As she teetered on consciousness, she glimpsed a blurred scene where Kamet implored a stranger to heal the bird, emphasizing her value. His loyal knight, Major Bass, swiftly healed her, prompting Rionel's attempt to call for the prince, albeit incoherently. Comforted by Kamet's proximity and the assurance of safety, she found herself in the care of his loyal knights and a mage who healed her at the prince's behest. Nestled in Kamet's arms, Rionelle marveled at feeling as good as new, her gratitude and recovery evident in this moment of respite. The magician departs, and as soon as they're alone, the prince embraces Rionelle warmly, expressing relief at her safety. The sudden tenderness catches her off guard, unprepared for such affection. Her heart races, compounded by inhabiting the body of a crow, amplifying the impact of receiving love from such a striking prince. The thought of him finding a human companion stirs a painful fear within her, contemplating the agony of witnessing that scenario. In a whirlwind of emotions, the crow unexpectedly breaks free from the prince's embrace, leaving him concerned he may have squeezed too tightly. While she mourns her fate and rages at the deity for not making her the main character, the prince apologizes, vowing to handle her with more care in the future. He acknowledges the bird's pivotal role in saving his life and achieving his transformation, expressing immense gratitude and a deep sense of debt. Realizing her existence is a breach of the rules, she vows not to allow the prince to form any other attachments, even contemplating dealing with any potential rivals herself. Perching on the prince's shoulder, she senses his contrition, believing the bird has forgiven him. Their moment is interrupted by a visitor, Knight Delanos, a character from the game whom she vaguely recalls as a loyal warrior. Delanos, repentant for not being present during the prince's hardships, offers his sword for execution. This act shocks both the prince and the crow. The prince values loyalty but doesn't wish for such extreme sacrifices, appreciating Delanos's loyalty to the prince, not his treacherous brother. They gather at a table, and the prince narrates how the crow's action saved his life. Delanos, taken aback by the bird's pivotal role, is inspired to match the bird's unwavering dedication. Observing the peculiar glances directed at her, the crow understands the challenge in dispelling stereotypes about crows. Curious about the situation in the capital, the prince queries Delanos, eager for updates. Delanos recounts being declared missing in action when his men's bodies were discovered, while he remained absent, concealed by his treacherous brother. Seeking the father's permission to form a rescue group, the emperor, hoping to avoid escalating tensions, allows the situation to unfold, granting the survivor the throne without further interference. The implications of such power struggles horrify Rionelle. She offers solace by rubbing her head against the prince's hand, a gesture he notices and acknowledges, soothing her with reassurances. Determined not to let his hard-earned achievements crumble, the prince instructs Delanos to head to the capital and inform the emperor of his return, anticipating a potential provocation from his brother. He plans to strategically anticipate any attack, leveraging the father's joy at the son's return and anticipating a delay before any confrontation. Journeying to the capital, Rionelle experiences the imperial palace firsthand, a stark contrast to the digital representations from her gaming experiences. Yet, the gravity of the situation tinges her joy, recognizing the multitude of adversaries poised against Kamet. Her avian form, she realizes, spares the prince from numerous complications, ranging from her origins to potential threats to the prince's status, preventing her from being taken hostage or targeted to harm Kamet. Despite her indignation, the prince places her in a bird cage, prompting Rionelle's strong displeasure. As she feels faint in the carriage, the prince, concerned, gently opens the cage to check on her well-being. Unaware of the distress the journey has caused the bird, the prince remains unaware of her discomfort. Though Rionelle remains angry at the prince for confining her and for her condition, her frustration prompts her to bite his fingers with her beak. Yet, his soothing gesture of stroking her head brings an immediate calm, transforming her back into a gentle crow. The prince admits that he couldn't envision venturing to the imperial palace without her. Surrounded by enemies and dubious allies, he values the opportunity to reveal a more vulnerable side of himself to Rionel, expressing a desire for her constant companionship, disregarding her true identity, whether she's a harpy or a dragon. Kissing her beak overwhelms Rionel with a mix of emotions, embarrassment, surprise, and happiness. The prince confides in her that in the presence of his adversaries, he must remain vigilant, deciding whom to keep close and whom to distance, finding solace and calmness only with the crow. Recognizing the advantage of her avian form, she acknowledges that it allows her to be closer to him without instilling fear in him. Despite her regrets at being a crow and the limitations it entails, she's determined to stand by the prince, offering her support and assurance by perching on his shoulder. Arriving at the palace, Rionel is captivated by its grandeur, attempting to contain her crow instinct amidst the opulence, immediately wiping away any hint of drool to keep the prince from noticing. The prince requests her to remain in place and quiet her, cautioning of potential risks, and assigns a servant to watch over her, warning of dire consequences if any harm befalls the crow. Meanwhile, the servant, feeling out of place and unsure how to handle the bird, attempts to feed her worms, prompting Rionel's distressed reaction. As the prince walks through the castle corridors, his thoughts linger on the crow, already yearning to return to her side. His younger brother, sporting a false smile, rushes towards him, claiming deep concern for his elder sibling, supposedly turning the castle upside down in search of him. The prince no longer trusts a single word from his brother, fully aware of his character, and remains cautious, despite the younger brother's apologies for causing worry. The prince discerns arrogance and a sense of entitlement in his brother, amplified by the ability to transform into a wolf, but devoid of understanding of crucial matters. The younger sibling remains oblivious, brushing off any conversation regarding his elder brother's absence, ultimately parting ways after exchanging tense glances. Visiting his ailing father, the emperor, the prince inquires about his health. The emperor, in a moderately stable condition, cryptically indicates that he's not yet succumbing to his illness. Observing his son's transformation, the emperor intimates that it was his brother's betrayal that compelled the change. Acknowledging the role his brother played, the prince promises to reclaim his right to the throne and allow his father to reunite with his deceased wife. During their conversation, the father expresses a desire for one of his sons to succeed him swiftly, yearning to reunite with his late wife and conveying the significance of choosing a mate for life, a bond he still misses dearly. The prince departs, cautioning that any discovery of his brother's involvement in their mother's death might lead to a turbulent ascent to the throne, highlighting his father's wish for a prompt succession. Meanwhile, the crow, confined in the cage, grows increasingly hungry, unwilling to consume the offered worms and dismayed by the foolish servant's ignorance. Her desperation for the prince to provide proper sustenance intensifies, though her aversion to eating bugs, a conflict between her avian instincts and human sensibilities, impedes her from succumbing to hunger. Surprised at the bird's worsening state after a short duration, the prince chastises the servant, quickly arranging for meat and fruits. Acknowledging her hunger, he gently prods her to consider consuming the bugs if necessary. Sweets are eventually offered, and after sating her hunger, the prince presents a gift to celebrate her return to the palace. The prince reveals a whole box of precious stones, which the girl examines with awe. She even places one in the prince's hand, akin to a gift. The young man is touched by the gesture, finding her affection endearing. Despite being content in the lavish room, the crow occasionally seeks fresh air in the gardens, relishing the walks. However, this leisurely flight alarms a gardener, who attempts to drive her away. The prince intervenes, warning the gardener about the bird's significance and threatening severe consequences if any harm befalls her. As the main characters converse, young prince, the elder brother, confronts the prince about the impending decision on who will ascend to the throne. Their discussion rapidly escalates into a heated exchange, marked by visible animosity and mutual aggression, culminating in Revillain transforming into a wolf. Observing the unfolding power struggle, the crow intervenes, delivering a strike to the wolf, defying its attack. Despite his thoughts about her safety, the prince acknowledges that she acted to protect him. Yet, he reprimands the crow, stating she can't risk herself to defend him, emphasizing her safety above all. Young prince, in his anger, seeks to retaliate against the crow for interfering, unaware of her intentions to protect the prince. His fury extends to the prince, blaming him for the crow's actions. The prince refrains from scolding the bird, understanding her bravery, but emphasizes the need to avoid placing herself in harm's way. He acknowledges her act of courage, but cautions her about the potential dangers she exposes herself to. The prince considers that if Rionelle were a Chozo or a dragon, she would have easily dodged the young prince's attacks. Yet, observing how she was injured previously, he wonders why she couldn't fully utilize her powers. There's still a possibility that Rionelle is simply an intelligent crow. With this in mind, the prince resolves to protect Rionelle until all threats are eliminated. He addresses the crow, stating that from this moment on, she should not jeopardize her safety to protect him. The prince asserts that his powers have awakened, enabling him to fight back now. With a warm smile, he emphasizes that above all, he doesn't want to lose Rionelle because of someone like his younger brother. Meanwhile, young prince, furious and determined to learn more about the crow, summons a mage to understand his brother's weak spots. As he dwells on the potential threat the crow poses, the prince engages in paperwork, the crow resting peacefully on his shoulder, both contemplating the recent events and the implications of the crow's bold actions. There's a knock on the prince's door, and Count Naville has arrived. The name triggers a sense of recognition in the crowd, and upon his entrance, everything falls into place. This count is none other than the handsome main character from her beloved game. The crow immediately flies off the prince's shoulder and fixates on the count with unusual attention. The prince is taken aback by the bird's behavior, feeling a tinge of jealousy. He approaches and requests the crow's return, reminding her of her loyalty. She recalls her role and obediently returns to her place, much to the prince's relief. The count is intrigued by the unusual bird and expresses a desire to study her in his laboratory, but the prince shifts the topic to the purpose of the count's visit. It happens to be a beautifully crafted necklace, custom-made, intended as a significant gift. The girl is thrown into a whirlwind of emotions, fearing the prince might marry someone else and abandon her. However, her despair turns to delight when the count fastens the necklace around her neck. Despite its loose fit, it's a symbolic gesture of care and affection, a sign that it's meant for her, not anyone else. Earl Naville, understanding the situation, smiles and acknowledges the significance of the necklace being specifically crafted to adjust to the wearer. He respects the prince's relationship with the bird and assures he won't provoke any undue attention. Yet, he's in need of the prince's protection, seeking refuge from the aristocracy as he's chosen the path of a mage. The prince informs the count that speaking about such matters within the imperial palace could lead to trouble. He then inquires about the count's intentions. The count reveals that his father often advised against getting involved in politics. Since the count's father never awakened his power and relinquished the right of succession, he distanced himself from the imperial palace to avoid misunderstandings. Turning to magic, the count avoided dealing with superficial nobles. But the youngest prince influenced the count's perspective, considering magicians as mere tools. Witnessing the youngest prince's abuse of magicians under his command, the count fears the empire will crumble under such leadership. Vowing not to let such an outcome occur, the count is determined to prevent a horrible fate. The prince, understanding the count's concerns, questions the count's commitment, knowing that individuals can drastically change after ascending to power. As they converse, the count presents a Crovan rock from inside his robe, intending to solidify his sincerity and faith in the prince. The crow, overhearing the conversation, is shocked and rendered speechless by what she sees. The disruption caused by her sudden appearance in the game world worries her, as it could potentially lead to a collapse of the entire game world. As the count and prince discuss the rarity of the Crovan rock, the crow is in disbelief, questioning her own luck in finding the rock. The count shares that he was fortunate to discover one in a griffin's nest. When the prince queries why the count didn't consume it himself, the count explains that being a part of the imperial family, eating the rock would likely awaken his powers. However, the count is more inclined to be a simple magician than to involve himself in the fight for the throne. The prince, understanding the count's sincerity, Marquis Namiel, is content with the response and appreciates the count's loyalty. With a smile, the count requests the prince's acceptance of his support, to which the prince steps forward, pledging to fund the count with whatever resources he requires in the future, solemnly vowing on his name. The count respectfully bows and expresses that his knowledge and abilities will be solely at the prince's disposal once he becomes emperor. He desires a relationship without formalities, emphasizing that despite his position within the imperial family, the prince should feel comfortable speaking to a mere noble. With warmth and agreement, the prince accepts the count's proposition. The prince was pondering who to give the received Croban rock to. He needed someone who would definitely not betray him. No one came to mind except the crow after all. There is a possibility that she is a harpy or a dragon, and it would be interesting to see what happens to her. If she eats this fruit, the main heroine was thinking about how she could break the entire plot. And look at the Croban rock for some reason. This thing fascinated her. She couldn't explain it herself. The crow approached and took the fruit in her beak. The prince in shock asked her to spit it out, as there was a significant risk that she would perish if she tried to swallow it. But the bird aided anyway, comment in shock. Try to make her spit it out. The young man, already in despair, understand that if her awakening began, simply wouldn't be able to withstand it, but all he could do was watch her agonizing death. However, strangely enough, nothing happened. The young man simply held the crow in his arms, and she was completely fine. Little later, having calmed down, the young man sat on the couch and the crow was next to him. The prince asked the bird not to take anything into her anymore, as she could die from it. The main heroine herself didn't remember how she did it. She looked at the Croban rock, and then there was just a white spot in her memory, but it seemed that she swallowed it. And since that was the case, why couldn't they make her, for example, a super crow, so that she could fight all her enemies? Although in reality she was hoping to be transformed into a human. It was probably foolish to count on that, although she would have been willing to endure any torment for this. Suddenly, she feels very ill. Her body starts to ache and she can hardly move. Is this the transformation? But she doesn't glow from within as it was with it. The princess himself also noticed the bird's condition and was genuinely frightened for her. He called a healer, but she just shrunk her shoulders. The bird's body is absolutely fine. She doesn't react to any spells. That's when Comment realized that it was because she swallowed the Croban rock. This means that there is no help for the crow, and he blames himself for it. The healer mentioned that if the crow was sick, the divine power would have seeped into its body to heal it. Finding it peculiar, the prince was speechless. As he observed Rionel's high fever, he questioned why the healer stated that there was nothing wrong with her when she was clearly unwell. Politely dismissing the healer, the prince thanked them, and they left. He sat on the sofa, contemplating the situation. He couldn't help but feel guilty, realizing that if he hadn't carelessly examined the Crovan rock in front of Rionel, this might never have happened. Now, he could only stand by helplessly and watch over her, feeling frightened and overwhelmed. Desperately, he spoke to Rionel, asking her to wake up, reassuring her that even if she played tricks or caused a fire, he wouldn't be angry. As evening set in, the prince found himself drifting into sleep. Meanwhile, the crow, Rionel, began glowing with a stunning purple hue emanating from her eyes. In an altered state of consciousness, she found herself in an unfamiliar setting, contemplating whether this was a dream. Her wings appeared different, no longer those of a crow. She wondered if she was deceased, but she refuted the idea, feeling that her life as a crow had been nothing but suffering. Moreover, there were many experiences she hadn't shared with the prince. Suddenly, with a burst of vibrant light and various hues shining through Rionel's body, she heard a story. The narrative detailed how a black bird soared the skies, aiding a wolf to see distant things and feeding on human corpses, gifted by the wolf to prevent bodies from burdening the land and the living. The story continued, explaining how the bird had birthed baby crows and scattered pieces of their shells across the land. This was to ensure that its descendants would consume them, enabling them to soar higher than their ancestors. The prince awakens in confusion, unsure how he had fallen asleep. Hurriedly, he checks on his crow, only to be astounded by the sight before him. Instead of the crow, a young girl in black garments lay under the blanket. His first thought is that she might be an assassin, yet her delicate hands rule out that possibility. It's unlikely that a killer would sleep so serenely in the presence of their potential target. His attention is drawn to the necklace around the girl's neck, confirming the reality of the situation. Running his fingers through her hair, he finds that it feels remarkably similar to the crow's feathers. It's unbelievable, Rionel has transformed into a human by consuming the crowbane rock. Startled, the girl wakes, wondering why the prince is touching her and insisting it's not yet breakfast time. She rises, rubbing her eyes, and upon realizing her hands are no longer wings, she's in disbelief. Urgently, she needs to find a mirror to assess this transformation. She rushes towards the first door she sees, eager to glimpse her reflection. What she sees is a stark departure from her previous life, a face akin to a soft doll, eyes resembling amethysts, and resplendent hair. She ponders the changes and her now fragile human form, lamenting the loss of her once strong avian muscles. Despite these concerns, she finds solace in her newfound human form. No longer confined to a cage, free from the idea of being fed worms, she's reassured. But what matters most is how the prince views this sudden transformation. The young man smiles and gently inquires if she's had her fill of inspecting herself in the mirror. The girl, now transformed into a human, feels overwhelmed by emotions and decides to express her gratitude by hugging the prince. She buries herself in his arms, her thoughts consumed with the idea of speaking with him. Overwhelmed with tears, she murmurs the prince's name repeatedly. When he asks about her tears, she struggles to explain the complexities of her existence, that she was originally a human from another world, died, and then became a crow, only to realize she was a character in a game. She recounts her journey, how she initially joined the prince to seek his power, hoping it might help her return to her world. But as a crow, she couldn't help but form a bond with him. Now, as a human, her emotions overflow. She's hesitant to disclose the truth to the prince as it might shatter his perception of his life's difficulties. The prince, in sheer delight, embraces her as he did when she was a crow, expressing his gratitude for her survival. The prince's delight at sitting beside Rionel is apparent as he expresses his joy through a heartfelt hug, thanking her for making it through safely. Rionel, overwhelmed by the situation, finds herself blushing suddenly. While the prince envelops Rionel, she's taken by the kind-hearted nature she always admired, even when she was a crow. But now, facing the prince's endearing smile, she struggles to contain a wild urge to pounce on him. The romantic scene leaves Raynell somewhat taken aback. When the prince raises the question about the appropriateness of hugging her in her human form, it stirs deep emotions within Raynell. Overwhelmed by the moment, she transforms abruptly back into her crow form, startled by the sudden change. Now, Raynell is in shock, but the prince is calming her down, mentioning that Raynell is just not used to it yet, and there's nothing practice can't fix. They finish practicing, and a delightful and delicious spread of food is laid out on the table. Raynell is beaming with joy at the sight of the meal, unable to recall the last time she had human food, and it's a full-course meal meant for a prince. The prince is delighted to see Raynell thoroughly enjoying her meal. Suddenly, the prince asks Raynell if she is great at using cutlery, inquiring if she already knows how to use them. Raynell, caught off guard, pauses in her eating, realizing that she was supposed to keep the fact that she used to be human a secret. However, the tempting array of dishes clouds Raynell's mind, and she uses cutlery too proficiently. Nervously, she claims she learned from watching the prince do it many times. The prince finds it fascinating, and Raynell decides she needs to be more careful from now on. After finishing her meal, the prince mentions that he will call for a maid to clean the table. He then asks Raynell to turn into a crow for a moment. Raynell agrees, concentrating her mind and transforming back into crow form. Raynell is pleased that she has mastered the transforming skill. As the maids start cleaning and clear the room, the prince falls silent and apologizes to Raynell, who asks for the reason. The prince, with a strong grip on his hand, mentions that Raynell has to hide her human form because of him. Raynell, anticipating something more dramatic, wonders if the prince wants her to act as a crow spy or dress up as a maid to assassinate his younger brother. However, the prince surprises her by asking Raynell to look out for herself. Raynell is a bit shocked by this unexpected request. The prince explains that his younger brother's greed may make it dangerous for Raynell to stay in her human form in the imperial palace for now. He promises to turn the palace into a safe place for her, whether she's in human or crow form. Until then, he asks Raynell to be patient. Blushing, Raynell agrees, expressing her willingness to help the prince achieve his dream quicker. The prince happily accepts her assistance, sealing the moment with a lovely and romantic hug.